Hi, welcome to Gospel with Greg. And in the video today, I'm going to be talking about um, when it's appropriate and maybe even needed to confront someone directly about their sin. And so this is going to speak to situations where, you know, you don't just say in general that something is sinful, but like you actually go up to a specific person and um, bring up something they're doing that's wrong and that needs to stop. Going to talk about when is that appropriate, and also how do we do it when it is necessary. And this is important because this is something that, while there are some situations where it's called for, it's something that can go very south and go very badly if you do it when it's not appropriate. And it can uh, ultimately just lead to more problems and make whatever issue was happening even worse. I've seen that happen in my own life um, where, like, I can think of an example several years ago where I basically confronted someone about something they were doing that was sinful, and I didn't use wisdom, and it just led to a big fight. And I did make up with the person. I apologized for the demeanor that I had that I shouldn't have about it, and so thankfully that got worked out. But it showed me how important it is to have wisdom about this. Um, and I've had people do that to me too, where maybe they would confront me about something that maybe I didn't even do. They kind of just didn't take the time to even find out all the details before they confronted me. And I didn't respond very well to that. And it kind of made me not take opinions they had after that very seriously, just because that's kind of an unfortunate effect of doing things like this when God didn't lead you to do it. And so when it comes to this, we can see in the Bible that there were times where Jesus confronted people about their sin, um, both those that were believers and those who weren't. And really, when you look across different cases of Jesus interacting with people, um, I think you can see that Jesus did kind of give some more grace toward people who were unbelievers. Um, he still, didn't compromise, but we can see that, when he would confront the Pharisees on what they were doing, the religious leaders who should have known better, he was more stern. And so that does show that there is, um, a place and situations for doing this. And so when it comes to when what might we as believers need to do it, ultimately, um, kind of my short answer to this is, there are, you know, basically countless ways someone could act out of line. So it's kind of difficult to, be able to give you 100% concrete answer of, what exactly to do in every, you know, any situation you could conceivably think of. But in general, simply just let God guide you on when to do it. And that really is important because, like I said, it can go um, very, very wrong if you don't listen to God. And so, if that kind of enters your mind that you might need to talk to somebody directly about something wrong or sinful they're doing, um, it's good to seek God on that and to pray about it, and to also pray that He would guide you on how to speak to them about this. And so that's very important. And it's also important to remember what the goal of this is. So if it is determined that you need to confront someone about a sin they're committing, and something they're doing that's maybe very damaging to others. It's important to remember that the goal isn't for you to look tough, or for you to have this feeling of, man, I really put Ed in his place. I really set him straight. And it shouldn't be a fight that you're trying to win. It shouldn't be like that. Ultimately, the goal should be, there's a problem, we need to address it. Now, maybe it'll be a little uncomfortable, the process of how we have to do that. But that's what the ultimate goal should be when we have to confront someone like this. The goal should be to resolve a problem, and we should ultimately hope that this person, realizes what they're doing is wrong and stops and becomes a better person. And I think that that's one thing that our society today has missed the mark on. If there's somebody who is wronging us, especially, we kind of have this. We at least can have this mentality of just wanting to set them straight out of anger, and not really have that you know mentality of hoping they become better and that they do better, and that's what we should want. And sometimes you got to do that through tough love, but that's what we should strive for. That's what we should approach this with. And so, um, there are some questions that we can kind of ask ourselves about a situation that we're in, that can help guide us too as we're praying about this, of whether we need to confront this person or not. One is, has this person already acknowledged what they did was wrong and repented and apologized and changed? Because if the answer is yes, they have, we kind of have to ask ourselves, why are we thinking about confronting them? Because what we should hope to accomplish is something that it sounds like it's already been accomplished. Another thing too is to ask ourselves, are we personally affected by it? And there's a passage I'm going to read in a minute, that touches on that aspect of it too. And are they a believer? Again, if they're an unbeliever, you know, they might not fully realize the spiritual significance of what they're doing. So we might have to give them a little more grace in how we approach things like this, and that's an opportunity to pray for them, to pray for their salvation, if it appears that they don't serve God. And we need to think about our relationship with the person too. You know, is it someone we know well, or is it not? Again, I've had people that would try to confront me about something that, and again, it might be something that um, they didn't have all the details about, and that's another thing. How much do you actually know about what they did? Because what you don't want to have happen is what a couple people um, have done before to me, which is they hear one or two things and then they think they know what happened, and then and then you confront them, and turns out they didn't even do um, what you thought they did, and then that kind of just makes things awkward. So it's important to ask that too. And to the point about how well do you know them, I've found, for me personally, people that I know really well and have a good relationship with, I can handle more tough love from them, because I know that they care about me and everything. But I've had uh, it happen before, where somebody who hardly knew me, tried to be very bold with me, and I'm just like, I don't even know you. And so we have to factor that into, and kind of ask ourselves about that. And so, again, these are kind of just questions to give some guidance for the situation you're in. But ultimately, please pray, please seek God, because God is never going to tell you the wrong course of action to take. And so, if it is ultimately determined that you do need to speak with this person about whatever it is they're doing, um, there are a couple things to keep in mind of how to do it, because what you don't want to make the mistake of is, oh, I need to confront them, so it's just a free for all. No, there's a way to do this, and the Bible highlights that. And so the first is, um, we need to make sure that we're not being a hypocrite as much as possible. So, you know, what we don't want to do is something that Jesus warned us against in Matthew chapter 7, in verses 3 through 5, which I'll read. And why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but considerest not the beam that is in thine own eye? Or how wilt thou say unto thy brother, let me pull out the mote out of thine eye, and behold, a beam is in thine own eye? Thou hypocrite, first cast out the beam out of thine own eye, and then shalt thou see clearly to cast out the mote out of thy brother's eye. And so Jesus warns us against being hypocrites here. We shouldn't, just shamelessly live in sin and, entertain these things and then point our finger in other people's face about, how they need to change and how they need to stop it. So, you know, we need to, and this isn't just when we're in a situation where we, are dealing with someone who has harmful behavior. We should strive to keep this in mind every day as we walk with Christ, to follow him to the best of our ability. And there is grace when we inevitably will fall short, but it's important that, we should love God, enough to want to strive to follow what Christ taught for us to do. And that's important in these situations, because if you confront somebody about their sin, but they can see you shamelessly living in sin yourself, it's not probably going to have much of a positive impact. They're probably just going to dismiss whatever you say. And they might dismiss what you say anyway, but we don't want to basically um, give them gas to pour on the fire with that. And so that's important. And then also, Jesus speaks more directly about kind of how to handle when people wrong us in particular in Matthew chapter 18, verses 15 through 17. Moreover, if thy brother shall trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone. If he shall hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother. But if he will not hear thee, then take with thee one or two more, that in the mouth of two or three witnesses every word may be established. And if he shall neglect to hear them, tell it unto the church. But if he neglect to hear the church, let him be unto thee as a heathen man and a publican. And so I referenced this passage in my video talking about the role of the local church, of how sometimes leadership, especially, has to deal with problems that might come up in the church. And so that's an important thing to think about too. If you're in leadership, you kind of have that extra responsibility of, if someone's causing problems in the church, to deal with that, because ultimately, um, you know, those in leadership, like pastors in particular, will have to give an account of how they've handled their calling and how they've handled the church. And so, if somebody's stirring up something wrong in the church, a pastor does have a certain obligation um, to deal with those things, and um, still needs to seek God on how to do that. But there is that responsibility there. And so, this passage that Jesus spoke on how to deal with these problems gives us several great insights on how to deal with things like this. Um, if somebody wronged us in particular, or if they're just doing something sinful that God has put on our heart that we need to speak to them about. So we can see here that it says initially to go to Him alone. And so to go to the person alone and try to resolve it one on one first. And then if they don't listen, then bring the witnesses and then bring them before the church. And what we can see when we look at this passage, and then also how Jesus um, uh, dealt with problems and kind of spoke with people about their sin, is we can see here that this is dedicated to solving the problem, um, also doing it privately, if possible, not running around gossiping about it to everybody else. And and those things just are conducive to that goal we should have in mind about wanting to resolve the problem first, because I think a lot of times we can go wrong with, we want to jump to confronting them and making a spectacle out of them in front of a bunch of others, which can just make them defensive, and it kind of just makes the drama even more. um, or even if we don't confront them in front of a bunch of people in the moment, running around gossiping about it to people that have nothing to do with it, can kind of do something similar. And also, when it comes to staying focused on the issue at hand, you know, that's something we really need to do, because if we just start getting into insulting them over stuff that has nothing to do with what we supposedly wanted to speak with them about, and we're just insulting them and telling them how dumb or ugly or this or that they are, again, that's not constructive. It's not very mature. um, it's not spiritually mature, also. And so this is the protocol that we need to follow. And again, Christ spoke this for a reason, and God's never going to lead us astray. And so ultimately, it is important to realize that there are some people that, even if God puts it on your heart that you need to speak with them, and you do it to a T, how he tells you to and what scripture says, there are going to be some people that, will dismiss what you say, or they'll try to blame, others for what they did, or make excuses, or maybe they'll even try to paint it like you're being mean to them. And that's unfortunate. But again, we are accountable for ourselves. As great, as it seems like it would be for us to be able to just snap our fingers and, make them stop what they're doing, ultimately, all we can do is strive to be the best servants of God that we can be, and the best example to others that we can be. Let that light of God shine that's within us from the Spirit of God living in us. Let that shine outward, and be that example and be that witness. And if other people are struggling in some way and have harmful behaviors, even if it really aggravates us, we should pray for them. And maybe just at first they don't seem receptive, but I've seen cases in my life where, without getting into specific details, I've seen people that did atrocious things on the scale of years. And a lot of people probably would have thought that they would never change, but there came a day where they came around, and they stopped what they did and they apologized to the people they wronged. And you could really tell that God was dealing with them, and they finally responded to that. So definitely keep praying for those people that you have to deal with and interact with. You'll be amazed at what the power of God can do in those situations. So hope you found this video helpful, and until next time, God bless.